All right. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone joining the Envirologics introduction of our total target for sprout damage test. Really looking forward to the next hour here and being able to introduce this rapid test. It's been a long time in the works. We have a pretty good team with us here, and hopefully over the next hour you'll have a better understanding of where this test came from, why it was created, and how it works, and then also have the opportunity to here's some customer testimonials from the field as well. So for the time being, all microphones and cameras have been turned off and muted. We would ask that any questions you do have, though, you type in the chat. We will still be able to see the chat function, and we'll plan to follow up on any questions after this webinar. So keeping it a little bit engaged there, but looking forward to getting this information out and hearing y'all's feedback as well. So with that, as I mentioned, we have a pretty good sized team here with our panel of presenters. My name is Matt McKee. I'm the Global Account Manager for Envirologics. In addition, we have Kelly Kemp, who is a pre and post-sale support specialist. So she is actually running the demo for us. And that's a face you'll see in the field doing trainings and onboardings. We have Dr. Amber Havermill, who's been an integral part of creating this test and working with our team. She'll be able to provide a bit of the background on how this test was created and why. And then we'll be able to hear from Centera Co-op from CC Von Steen here, who's going to be able to share a little bit of their experience in beta testing this. So a quick introduction on really of Envirologics. So Envirologics is a diagnostics company that's been in the industry for about 25 years now. The majority of our portfolio has been focused on rapid tests for GMO and mycotoxin detection. However, we have been able to expand this to include overall grain quality solutions that really encompass antigen testing, allergen testing, and now sprout damage as well. The backbone of our company is built on partnerships with the industry as well. So in bringing new GMO tests to market, you have to understand which traits are there, and in building mycotoxin tests, you need to understand what the industry actually wants and needs. We really pride ourselves on this industry collaboration and culture of co-development is how we would brand it here. The last thing I'd like to point out is that Envirologics is a global company. In partnership with some key distributors, we're able to serve over 100 countries. We do have direct offices based in the US. Portland, Maine is our headquarters and the home of all R&D and manufacturing for us. In addition, we have a PCR and LCMS lab in St. Charles, Missouri, as well as commercial offices in Brazil, China, and now in Europe as well. So at this point, now that we've done a brief background, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Amber Havermill to explain why this test was created and to give a bit of background on the FFAR project and grant.
Thanks, Matt. Next slide. Yes. So one of the big challenges that we face in the grain industry, and this should come to no surprise to anyone on this call, is that there are economic losses that occur globally every year due to elevated levels of alpha amylase that cause starch damage. These economic losses come from physiological causes called late maturity alpha amylase and pre-harvest sprouting. And I'm going to get into those a little bit more in a moment. But one of the additional challenges that we see when trying to manage these problems is that with increased climate variability, it's harder and harder to predict when these problems are going to happen. And then just from a logistics standpoint, there are lots of testing limitations at the level of the field. So the tests that are currently available are not accessible. They're big, they're bulky, they're slow, and they're low throughput. So part of the inspiration for this project was to try to develop something that was more accessible at very diverse levels of the grain chain. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there are two causes of low falling numbers that we primarily deal with in the Pacific Northwest. These are late maturity alpha amylase, and then the one that people are likely more familiar with, pre-harvest sprouting. Pre-harvest sprouting occurs in mature grain prior to harvest when you get a rain event and you get elevated levels of alpha amylase because the seeds think that it's time to germinate. The other thing that we deal with is this other thing called late maturity alpha amylase, where earlier, much earlier in development, due to a temperature shock, the seeds start to express alpha amylase in random pockets. So these are very distinct from each other, but the overall result from these events is a lower falling number. The challenge, though, is that with regard to late maturity alpha amylase, there is no visible phenotype for this. The grain looks fine, and unless you experience a severe pre-harvest sprouting event, many times you can't see that one either. So what happens is that growers will go out, they will harvest their fields thinking that everything is fine. They send all of that material to the elevator, it then gets blended, and then very far down in the grain chain is when it actually gets tested here, and that's when we learn that we have problems. And in that case, the horse has already left the barn. So again, this was the inspiration for wanting to develop something more accessible at earlier points in the grain chain. Next slide. So what I'm showing here is, again, a different perspective about how we've experienced low falling numbers events in the Pacific Northwest. And this is a timeline for events. So everything above the line is where we had grain quality that met spec, and everything below the line indicates a low falling number event. It's important to say that regionally we have events every year, but they're not always large. And so in some instances, though, on this timeline, some of these events were major. The other thing that I want to point out here is that we had some events in the early 90s. That was actually what initiated export requirements for falling numbers of a certain threshold in the PNW. And then we had a long period from about 1994 until about 2006 where we didn't really have any events. And then you can see that after 2006, we have more frequent occurrences of low falling number events. So why does this matter? Well, in 2016, we had a huge event here in the PNW. It wasn't regional, it wasn't localized. It was kind of everywhere all at the same time. And traditional methods for management at the elevators, blending off, did not work for us. And so all of our stakeholder groups got together and hosted a falling number summit where the stakeholders said, we need a better test for managing this problem. And so that happened in 2017. And then in 2018, I actually started with the team. It's important to note that people had been working on this long before I started. And my role in 2018 was really to initiate efforts to develop a more rapid test. We here at WSU developed a prototype for that using monoclonal antibodies. And then in 2020, started a conversation with Envirologics about whether or not some of that technology might be suitable for the technology that they rapidly develop and deploy. For those of you that don't know, Envirologics has been in the industry for decades, developing these sorts of diagnostic tests, and they were really eager and interested to be part of this process. So in 2020 is when we formalized that relationship, and in 2023 was when we were actually awarded a Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research grant. So what we knew was that we didn't have the ability to here at WSU, we didn't have the ability to scale or reach markets. So we really needed a strategic partner. Next slide. So one of the unique things about the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research is that it is a grant that requires big stakeholder investment and input. So unlike other traditional sources of funding that universities receive, this actually requires a dollar for dollar match of some sort between the researchers at the level of the university and then in collaboration with all of the stakeholder partners. And so it's a unique opportunity to ensure that everybody has real skin in the game. And so as a result of this grant, we were really on the path to develop new tools for late maturity alpha amylase and pre-harvest sprouting risk management. So right here, what I'm showing is the primary grant objectives. We had 6 of them, and as you can see, there's a little EnviroLogix icon next to all of the objectives that EnviroLogix has been deeply involved in. The first is to develop the new rapid high throughput test for alpha amylase screening. And what's nice about the test that's been developed is that it actually reports out with a falling number, an approximation of a falling number. And that was one of the major things that our stakeholders said that they needed to have for adoption of a new test, because the industry speaks in falling number. And then additionally, we wanted to be able to validate this new technology across diverse markets. So last summer, we were able to deploy the new test in a large-scale pilot testing program at 3 major locations in the Pacific Northwest. And then finally, number 5 is to develop tests to accelerate breeding for LMA and pre-harvest sprouting resistant varieties. And so we're excited because this summer we're actually going to be integrating this technology into our variety testing programs, both here at Washington State, at Oregon State University, and then with some of our company variety trial testing programs as well. So this has been a huge effort, and we're really excited. So finally, I just want to show you here, again, I mentioned earlier that there have been lots of us working on this for quite a while in different capacities. And it really does take a village. I always joke that our yearbook slide gets bigger and bigger every year. But I just wanted to show you some of the people that have been involved in this project. We have the folks here at Washington State University. The first 2 are my graduate students in my program. Oregon State University, the University of Idaho, and then we've had strong collaborations with the USDA ARS. And then down at the bottom, all of the stakeholder groups in the PNW that have been involved in this project. The Washington Grain Commission, of course, EnviroLogix, Highline Grain Growers Cooperative, the McGregor Company, the Wheat Marketing Center, and then the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. So with that overview, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt, and he can actually describe more about the test.
Perfect. Thanks for the background there, Dr. Amber. I think that was helpful for everybody to understand how long this has been in the works as well, and understand the true industry ask. So from EnviroLogix perspective, when we looked at the current testing methods within the industry and opportunities for elevators, we wanted to really track the chart, or track the movement of wheat throughout the supply chain. So where we found two gaps that we were looking to solve was at the inbound decision point at a grain elevator. So this is where there wasn't necessarily a feasible or a widely deployable screening tool to ensure that your elevator was not taking sprout damaged wheat in-house, because then as you turned to ship that out into a wheat mill, you're in the risk of either having your truck completely rejected and turned around, or being discounted at the mill, but not having taken that discount in at your elevator and suddenly being on the wrong end of that discount scale. So we sought to move forward there and try to fit this into our existing portfolio. Envirologics builds all of our tests to run on one scanner. So when you look at really the two product columns here, our what we would consider rapid tests are all positioned on the left side of the screen here. So this includes our GMO testing, which is called Total Trait, our mycotoxin testing, which is Total Tox, and then the adjacent product testing, which is Total Target. So as I mentioned earlier, that is allergens, antigen, and now sprout damage. All of our lateral flow devices, so our rapid tests, will scan on our quick scan platform. Depending on the commodity being tested and how many tests you need to run, that machine will actually hold 22 strips at a time. You can name everything the same sample ID, read all the tests at once, and move on. So it's a very high throughput device that can suit any Envirologics product. In addition, we have a PCR and LCMS lab. As I mentioned, that's in St. Charles, Missouri, and this is your third-party certified lab testing that's giving you a certificate of analysis, et cetera, that can be widely shared within the industry. All of these products then actually flow into a central cloud-based portal as well called Total Hub. We'll review that a bit later, but the goal as we turn back to sprout damage was to make this test easy to use, to make the data visible, and for it to fit into our existing product families as opposed to being another piece of equipment or something needed to be added to your elevator. Now getting to the actual test, Total Target for sprout damage is a bit different than the existing falling number method. This is an actual direct measurement of amylase activity. So as I mentioned earlier, it reads using our quick scan. The quick scan 2 is the current model. You see it on your screen here on the right side. This test shares a common workflow with our Total Tox Dawn. So it's one sample prep, so to speak. Your grind, your water addition, your shake time, that is all the same. This uses a new technology though. This is a patented substrate pellet. We'll review this in a little bit as well, but this really allows us to pull that amylase out and understand how much of it is present. We are calibrated to the falling number method. As Dr. Amber mentioned, we give results in seconds. And then again, focusing on where we wanted this test to fit in the industry, we're really looking at that grain inspection point, possibly internal batch testing. We have some batch testing protocols where we can really run 20 of these in an hour and get some high throughput there. So a brief overview of how this works. As I mentioned, this is an amylase measurement as opposed to really a viscosity measurement. So we're able to eliminate some of the potential impacts that are caused by outside factors such as protein content, barometric pressure, right? This is looking at the physical properties here at the amylase. In addition, this could lead to results possibly differing from the existing falling number methods because it is not a direct correlation. The science is different here. To describe how this test is working, though, what you're doing is taking a clarified extract and you are going to introduce that to a insoluble substrate pellet. This is that patented substrate pellet I was discussing. When you add your wheat extract, which contains amylase, the amylase is actually capable of digesting that substrate pellet, which in the third tube here you can see is indicated by a glowing red. We can then take that that known amylase, now that it's highlighted and detected, we can have that then flow up a strip, and the LFD flow separates the insoluble substrate and the soluble indicator molecule, which is a fancy way of saying it allows us to see how much of that substrate pellet has been digested, and it plots it on a strip essentially. So in reviewing the four key areas of this test, as we move through these following slides, we're gonna focus on four key buckets at first and build on those as we go. So step one is to prepare your sample. As I mentioned, this is sharing a common extraction with our Dawn test. So it's really no additional work there if you're already testing Dawn in wheat. Step two is an incubation. We have a 90-second incubation at 70 degrees Celsius. Given that this is a plastic test tube at 70 degrees Celsius, this drastically reduces your burn hazard or risk of shattered glass. Step three is going to be to run the test. And then step four is to read the results and actually quantitate what you have in your sample. So a few key bullets there. This is going to be fast. The test should be run. When you understand the workflow, you're going to have a sample of wheat in your hand, and 7 minutes later, you'll have your sprout damage result. As I mentioned, it's streamlined. This is a common workflow with our Total Tox Dawn, so they're working in tandem. We're trying to reduce too many additional steps and workflows here. It is safer because you have a lower temperature and reduce that risk of glass shattering. In addition, we're then taking this data and making it usable and visible to the organization. So Total Hub allows anyone within your organization to see these results in real time, as opposed to having to play telephone or send spreadsheets around between the operator and anybody that needs that falling number result, whether that's quality, merchandisers, etc. And then lastly, it is efficient when you're especially batch testing and have the capability to run 20 plus tests. You can really move through some samples here and gain that actionable insight to your grain quality quickly. Breaking down what this workflow will look like in a slightly more detailed view, we have our sprout test, our sprout damage test, and our Dawn test essentially displayed in tandem here. So step one, as I mentioned earlier, is to extract and clarify the sample. That is going to be a 20-gram sample, 100 milliliters of water, and a 30-second shake. You're then going to take a sample of that, centrifuge for 30 seconds, and then you have your clarified solution. So you will take, for the sprout damage test only, take 300 microliters of that, incubate it with your substrate pellet for 90 seconds. Now we're to step three, which is running the test. Your sprout damage test will run for 3 minutes. Now, due to some of that additional incubation step, etc., when you place your sprout damage test in for 3 minutes, you can have about 1 minute of work for your Dawn test. So the idea is you run your sprout damage for 1 minute, then enter your Dawn test to its test tube. They both finish at the same time, and you can have a simultaneous read, as you see displayed on our quick scan 2 there on the right. Now we will move it over to a actual demonstration. I think I've talked enough about the steps. Everybody would like to see it actually happening. So for this, huge shout out to Kelly Kemp for assisting with the demonstration here, and we will go ahead and get that queued up.
Hi, folks. I just want to check. Can you hear the video?
No.
Okay. Sorry about that technology error. Let me fix that. Bear with us. I really appreciate it. How about now? Okay, I'm just going to hold my settings just for 1 second. It seems that we have some mixed reviews about the audio of the video. I'm so sorry about this and really appreciate you bearing with us. Um, you know, how was that?
Okay, apologies for the audio delay there, and that this means you have to hear my voice for a little while longer. But thankfully, I can just speak to the steps that Kelly is showing here, since it seems like we're not quite able to get a hold of her audio. So allow me to walk through what has been done so far. So Kelly unboxed the Sprout Damage Kit. In every kit, you will have uh, a handful of standard pieces of equipment. So every kit will come with a product insert. This is essentially the long-handed instructions of how to run our test. You'll receive a sheet of what we call MMBCs, or multi-matrix barcodes. And what these allow you to do, this is the unique curve that's put on every kit and then on each wheat variety. So for soft white wheat, the test will run slightly different than with soft red, but you're going to scan these MMBCs into your quick scan. And then when you read the test, you select the matrix group that you would like, and the quick scan knows how to interpret the test from there. This is for anyone that uses our mycotoxin tests, should be very familiar with this process. That same exact workflow there. The quick scan will then remember that MMBC for every future test. So you just do this once per kit and you're able to move on. In addition, she showed the 3 vials that you still see on her screen. So you have a tube of the actual lateral flow device, the test strip. You have a tube of substrate pellets, and then you have a vial of DB6 buffer there. So important to store the buffer and test strips in the fridge for long-term storage, but we do want these to come up to room temperature in order to run the test. In addition, your kit will ship with enough pipette tips for the number of tests in your kit for the 50 tests, and then it will also have test tubes to run all tests. So at this point, Kelly has taken a 20-gram sample of ground wheat. This is ground using a bun grinder, just on the Turkish setting, which is the same as our Dawn workflow. She has added 100 microliters of distilled deionized or bottled water to that sample. We really want to make sure that we're just avoiding like a dirtier well water here, but we do have the flexibility to use distilled deionized or bottled. And when she adds that 100 milliliters of water, you cap your shaker cup. And one key piece here is to give it, to basically bang it on the table for 10 seconds, or to, for a couple hard knocks there to make sure that that solution on the bottom is really, really mixed up well, that you don't have any ground samples stuck to the bottom. You then have a 30-second shake. This is typically done by hand, but using a shaker table as well, if you prefer. And then you're going to essentially be done with your shaking process. You're going to take a portion of that sample and add it to a centrifuge tube. And this really brings us to the point that we're at now. So this is a 30-second centrifuge. Up to this point, you are still following the same workflow for both sprout damage and Dawn. All right, now that the 30-second centrifuge is completed, as you can see there, you have a nice clarified solution on top. We're going to go ahead and begin to break the two workflows apart. So what you see Kelly doing here now is taking her tube of substrate pellets. And for this, we're going to recommend using a set of really long tweezers that we are able to provide you, but you can also use your hands here. We just would like for you to have a glove on. We don't want the actual oils from your palm to be on that substrate pellet and potentially impact the test. In addition, the tweezers make it much more convenient to just get one substrate pellet at a time. Kelly's now getting her 300 microliter pipette ready, and she is going to add 300 microliters of her clear solution to the test tube that already has the substrate pellet in it. Once that has been added, we're going to go to our Vortex Genie here. And this is slightly different from the mycotoxin workflow that you're accustomed to. We're going to do a 15-second vortex here. And this really ensures that that substrate pellet has dissolved and suspended within the solution. We do have product numbers available if you do need to purchase a Vortex Genie. This is not a product of Envirologics, but the one that Kelly just used there does have a very convenient timer so that you don't over vortex. It'll just turn itself off at 15 seconds. We are now at the point of a 90-second incubation at 70 degrees Celsius. One key piece to point out here is that our Dawn test runs at room temperature. So we often provide incubators for our customers that are in a probe stand because they do tend to get hot or cold depending on the season. So we want our Dawn test to run at 22 degrees Celsius, whereas our sprout damage test will run at 70 degrees Celsius. So if you are in an environment like that, we recommend having 2 incubators side by side. Also helps keep the workflow separate for a bit of convenience there as well. But once you set these, you can forget about it. It'll turn itself back on to that temperature every time. Kelly is now working with a fresh pipette tip here, and she's going to be prepared to add 300 microliters of DB6 solution to her test tube. So very important that we do this at 90 seconds because this DB6 solution will actually stop the reaction that's currently happening. And right on cue, perfect. Kelly has added that 300 microliters to her test tube. At this point, we're going to have a 3 to 5 second vortex to just quickly make sure that it is all well distributed in there. And then we're going to have a 30-second settle. And so give some of that foaming time to reduce and for this sample to settle. So now going to go ahead and remove a test strip from the tube of strips here. It is important to keep these capped while not in use. We actually have they should be in a relatively controlled environment, and the test tube has a desiccant cap in there to help control any moisture. Moisture and lateral flow devices don't get along too well, so we want to keep that out. At this point, you now see Kelly adding the strip into her test tube, just in a test tube holder. We don't want this in the incubator at this point, and she's going to start her timer for 3 minutes. At this time, I think it would actually be a good opportunity for us to review a few of the things you can be doing in the background. So you can add your sample ID, which it looks like Kelly is getting ready to do here. You can also add the supplier information so that information is queued up and you don't have to enter anything additional after reading the test. In addition, if we were going to be running the dawn test during this 1 minute here, you would take 100 microliters of DB6 and 100 microliters of remaining of the clarified solution in your centrifuge tube, add those to a test tube, and begin your 2-minute dawn procedure. So it is important if you're running the 2 tests in tandem, you want to save that centrifuge tube as you work through this test. All right. Now, Kelly did conveniently have a test ready for us so that we could keep this webinar moving along. And you can see that she's just removed that test from a test tube. What you're going to want to do is cut the tail pad off so that you stop the flow of solution up that test strip. Place it in your scanner and then hit read test. Perfect. Now you can see the supplier information and sample ID have already been entered. Kelly received a result of 264 seconds on this particular sample using the soft white wheat matrix. And at this point, you're able to just close this program. Your result has been saved. Your data will push up to TotalHub, and you have your result. If you had run both the sprout damage and dawn test, you would see a second line there indicating your dawn value with the same sample ID and supplier name. You would be able to select the action again, as you can see Kelly doing here. Perfect. If you do have any questions about that workflow, apologies for the audio delay. Well, lack of functionality, the audio mishap. We will be sending this out as well afterwards, and we do have these training videos available that we can provide you so that you can reference that in the future. One area that I would like to turn to now is going to be TotalHub. So we discussed how these results will push to a central cloud-based portal. We have that pulled up here, and we'll be able to walk you through it just over the course of a couple minutes. So if you think about TotalHub, you really have, this was designed for data visibility, and we have two primary columns of data. That's quick scan and lab services. Over the past couple of years, as we've built this out, we've been able to add a few additional features that we'll be reviewing later on. But if we just go to quick scan to begin, the goal of this is to provide, visibility and allow you to make decisions with the data as opposed to it being stuck in a workbook next to the quick scan or stuck in the quick scan itself. So from any internet connected device, you can view this data. And what we have on the first dashboard here is just load acceptance. This gives you the opportunity to see, how many trucks were accepted or rejected on any day, or for any given period of time, based on the actual function that you assigned to it in the quick scan as you are working through those results. So this is a high level overview of inbound quality. If we move over to the mycotoxin tab here, this gives you a good indication of each data point. So we've essentially taken each rapid test and created a data point with it that you can then chart out again for any given time period that you would like. So in this case, we're looking at dawn results on corn. And you can see if you actually hover over these dots, it'll give you a brief indication of who has brought that grain, right? You have the date, the actual result, sample ID, location. So you can get a feel for if someone's quality is off, maybe they've switched to a different field, or if this is post-harvest, they're pulling out of a new bin. It allows your merchandisers to make decisions on how they need to be coordinating inbound grain as well, or possibly slow someone down if they are bringing grain in that's out of specs. Sprout damage will begin reporting up through the food quality tab that you see there. So you'll be able to get a data point for every sprout damage test, see it in this portal, and make decisions with that. In addition, just to highlight the rest of the functionality of TotalHub, we do have a labs function on here as well. All of our lab ordering and result reporting will move through TotalHub. So with the green box in the top right-hand corner, you can place a new lab order. All of your results will be charted on dashboards as well. And then when it comes time to actually pull your certificates of analysis or work through an audit, all of your past COAs are stored in TotalHub. So it's the one home for all of your EnviroLogics testing data. As we've continued to build out TotalHub, we've added additional features that allow you to really see the status of your quick scans within your network. So if you're operating a large number of quick scans across your elevator network, you can begin to see how often they have run their check comb, their clean test, or calibrated. You can download all of your data to an Excel file as well, with custom metrics so that you can run the same report daily, weekly, yearly, whatever you would like there. And then we also have an alerts function that, say for sprout damage, since that is the theme of the hour here, if you begin to see results trending below a certain level, or if a truck has been accepted that's, say, below 275, you would actually get an email alert at the cadence of your choosing. It could happen as soon as that truck is accepted. It could be an end of day average. These are really customizable notifications to help bring that data to you without you having to go into the portal and refresh it every time. Moving on from there, we have the quality and training portion. This is where EnviroLogics is sought to help provide you with training modules, essentially, that we've created. So this could be as simple as a test ensuring that your operators know how to run the quick scan, simple quick scan proficiency training. This could be a dawn proficiency training, and in time we'll introduce additional mycotoxin, GMO, and sprout damage test as well. You can assign these to operators and then receive a notification as soon as they've been created. A nice feature as well for audits to prove operator proficiency and ensure that your operator base is knowledgeable on how to run the test. The final two pieces here, the Help Center has a handful of frequently asked questions and support guides. It is where you can find your TotalHub login credentials. And then lastly, the admin settings, is where you will add or remove users. The way Total Hub works is EnviroLogics creates one admin for a company and then allows you to really grow it organically within your organization. So any questions on that? We are happy to discuss them as well. Please keep questions and comments coming through the chat. At this time, though, we're going to use the last few minutes here to hear from a customer that has been with EnviroLogics through the beta testing process. So I will allow Cece to give herself a quick introduction. I think that would be best for the group. And Cece, if you wouldn't mind just telling us about yourself and Centera.
Well, hi everyone. I am Cecilia Vonstein. I am the Assistant Grain Operations Manager for Mansfield and Grafton Grain for Centera Co-op. I've been with the company for almost 5 years here. Centera has over 30 different locations from like the northeast, eastern Ohio, all the way out around PA. We range from agronomy, grain, retail, fuel, propane. So there's that.
Perfect. That'll work for us. Can you explain when you were first introduced to EnviroLogics? Were you a past mycotoxin user, or was this the first time you'd interacted with us?
I've used EnviroLogics for dawn testing for BOM through corn and in wheat. So I've been doing that for probably about 7 years. Been familiar with EnviroLogics.
Great. And then when were you first introduced to the sprout damage test? Can you give us a little background?
We had gone to Jeeps and we had asked about the falling numbers test and potential if you guys were ever going to do something around that, because we had heard word that you were. And we had been told that there was some testing going on, and that once the testing kind of came around and you guys were able to like come out and show us you guys were going to, and you guys gave us a phone call one day asking when a good time and opportunity to come out and demo your product. So you came out to our facility in Mansfield and ran the product, and we had asked to be beta testers if you guys were interested in that, because we were interested with the system, wanted to learn more about it, and we would really benefit from being able to run this type of system, knowing how many bushels of wheat that we handle.
Perfect. So on that note too, can you give a bit of background on why it's important to know at your facility to have an understanding of your, falling number metrics, or really your amylase measurements in this case?
Shipping it out, obviously. We do rail and we do outbound trucks. Outbound trucks go to a facility about 40 minutes away. And obviously, if our falling numbers aren't in range, it gets shipped back to us, obviously making it harder to deal with. And then at that point, you got to figure out where it's going to go and how much quality of, do you have good wheat? Do you have bad wheat?
Perfect. So then as you were hearing about how this test could potentially fit into your system, I guess at first, did it seem like a good fit? What feedback did you have for it? And then can you just give a, brief kind of background on how it has worked for you since that time?
At first, I was worried about the amount of like procedures and steps you had to take to run the test, because it looks like a lot when you sit down and look at all the vortex and how long you shake it for. That 7 minutes running is not as long as it seems compared to the dawn. Because I mean, you like to have dawn done in 2 minutes. That's great, but falling number done in 7 is even better. I wouldn't ever really get truly behind during the day. You could probe a truck, get your sample, grind it, and by the time that truck was dumping, you could have your results. So it never slowed anything down. So at first, I thought that was kind of going to do that. We were going to have customers waiting on the scales, but that was never a thing.
Perfect. So then with harvest now knocking on the door for your area in the next month and a half to 2 months here, how do you all plan to use this sprout damage test, this total target for sprout damage, both at the start of harvest and then throughout the year as well? Say if there is no falling number issue, or if there is, maybe you give us a couple examples there, or a couple scenarios.
So when normally we do harvest, like for wheat harvest, or corn harvest, we will run almost every single truck coming in on dawn. So I would hope, or we will do a certain amount of trucks on falling numbers this coming year, just to know ideally where it is, at least for the first couple of days. And then if we see a trend in the weather change, we'll change our testing methods probably to see where we're going from there, so that we know we have a basic idea. Harvest is only usually week long normally. You get slammed your first 3 days, and then you get your stragglers uh, from there.
Perfect. And then as you reduce dawn testing, I mean, typically let me rephrase this. Will sprout damage testing be on a quality basis? Will you adjust to composites as needed or potentially back off of it except for maybe outbounds? How do you see that working within the elevator?
I see it going based off of quality. If we know we have a good quality coming in, we'll test less.
Yeah, makes sense. Perfect. Well, then I think I would be remiss if my last question wasn't around how you would recommend this both to other elevators within your Centera network and to other users within the field. If you had any kind of words of wisdom from the past year or so about your learnings and findings beyond some of maybe the additional, how can we get the runtime a little bit faster or something. Any feedback you have for the group around learning the workflow? Right.
Honestly, this was very beneficial for us. And, small elevators, obviously, it's beneficial to know what you have coming in. But always obviously have your process down. I would prepare everything sometimes earlier in the mornings, have all my pipe ups, have everything ready throughout the day so that I know, when we hit, truck number 200 for the day, I'm not behind, or, it's going to be a busy day today. So I would make sure everything was lined up, ready to go. I had my kits ready. I would run I would get kits out early, and I would scan them and then put them back in the fridge to make sure that that was one less step I had to do. I could just go grab a box, and then keep going throughout the day. But I mean, it helped. I mean, to know what stuff was coming in. And, you see a rougher looking sample and you're not sure what that is. We were able to run that and get something off of it and know that, just because it looked a little rougher, it really truly wasn't at that point. So that was nice to know.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the feedback there. We're looking forward to continuing to work with you all and continuing to prove the value of this test during wheat harvest here over the next coming weeks. So with that, now that we've chewed through almost the whole hour here, it's at least gone by quickly for me. We'll go ahead and put a couple slides up here just for next steps as well. We've discussed our soft white wheat test primarily today. That was the purpose of the grant, and the area we were focusing on is soft white wheat dominant. We do have the soft red wheat matrix coming out very soon here. And then as we look towards future steps, focusing on European markets, the hard red market and hard white, we really just want to keep hearing from the industry what is needed and when, so that we can work through prioritizing these build outs and making sure that this test works for you and that it serves the purpose that it's intended to. We have a QR code here that you can scan in order to send us more information. We'll leave that up for just a few seconds here so everyone can pull out their phones and scan that real quick. And then lastly, just as we conclude, I would like to give a huge shout out to everyone that helped make this possible. We obviously had the panel that is on here. Dr. Amber, thank you so much for the year's worth of work. Cece for sharing your experiences in producing this test. Kelly did a phenomenal job with the demonstration. We might have had a bit of an audio mishap there, but worked with it, and we can always get you another demonstration video so that you can see the product in action. My thanks go to the EnviroLogix marketing team as well, and Steph for being flexible there as we had those technical difficulties. We will, as a sales team, now move through the individual chat function, the questions that you sent over. We'll respond one-on-one with those answers as well. to really carry on a Q&A portion of this. And then if you have any other questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Info@Envirologics will make sure that your email and your questions get into the organization, and we can figure out how they need to be distributed from there. But looking forward to hearing industry feedback, learn more about the use cases across regions, and hopefully really providing some value for wheat handlers with this new solution. So with that, thank you all so much. We will send out some follow-up information to everyone and be in touch, but really appreciate the time here. Hope you found it valuable, and we'll all talk soon. Thank you.